rediscovering the joy in work. And somebody give me a thumbs up if they can see it. Lovely, thank you very much, lovely. Okay, so that's me, Dr. Katia Miles. I'm a wellbeing trainer and coach. Like I said, I'm the head of training at Joyful Doctor, which is a wonderful organisation. I'm the founder at the Working Well Doctor. So a little bit about us, me and Caroline Walker. So I'm Katia, for those who were here at the beginning. I'm a just seeing how many of us are on the call actually now. We've got 20 on the call, so a few people have joined. Welcome if you just joined. I am a GP and occupational health doctor turned wellbeing trainer and careers coach. I have had my own journey, as they say, with mental health problems. I had quite severe anxiety and ended up burning out. And the reason I ended up in burnout is because I didn't acknowledge I actually had an anxiety condition. For a long time, I was telling myself it was just a bit of work stress, or there were lots of transitions, including coming back to work after 2 maternity leaves and some other issues. I had a miscarriage and other things. And each of those transitions, I wasn't really noticing or naming how I was feeling, and I wasn't able to access resources, and there were some system issues as well that made it quite challenging. A big part of the things that I struggled with is I didn't know anybody, I couldn't see anybody in my world who was going through what I was going through, and I found the stigma of that really challenging. And that was the real reason I founded the Working Well Doctor, because I really wanted to talk about those things, reduce the stigma around mental health issues, and also give some practical tools and tips for helping people to thrive in their work and in their home life. And as a mother, GP and occupational health doctor, and I've always trained throughout my whole life, is a really interesting perspective, especially thinking about work from a systems perspective, as well as thinking about how it is to be a person in a caring profession. We're often people with many caring roles, both inside and outside work. It's lovely to see in the chat that you guys have got loads of different caring roles, which makes you amazing people, but it also can be quite a strain, I think, sometimes, whether it's your dog or your children, along with the actual day job. So those are some of the themes around why I started the Working Well Doctor, and I now deliver workshops like this. I also do careers coaching, because a lot of people I know are struggling with their careers, whether or not they want to change career or just find a way to thrive in their current career is what we explore together, and empower people to make their own choices about what feels best and works best for them. And then I also do a sort of advocacy, which I guess is the bit where you talk about the stigma and you just share stories to help change culture. Obviously, that's probably a generational bit of work, but I'm trying to do my half penny's worth. And then consultancy, helping teams that are struggling in a more broad sense, whether it's primary care teams or hospital-based teams, with a mixture of sort of programs which are usually bespoke, sort of training and coaching combined. So that's what I get up to. And then Dr. Caroline Walker here, she's an absolutely lovely lady, a great friend of mine. She founded the Joyful Doctor, where I'm head of training, and she is a psychiatrist, therapist and coach, and she has bipolar disorder and alcoholism. She's better from both of them. She hasn't drunk for about 6 years now, and she manages her bipolar really and is presently stable, but she had a really tough journey getting to this point, and along with her own personal struggles dealing with bipolar disorder and alcoholism, she saw a lot of other doctors struggling, and so there was a big overlap in the themes that I've just described for myself. So there's a lot of stigma, a lot of problems about doctors in particular talking about how they feel, feeling they have permission to look after themselves, and if you don't manage that well, you can end up quite poorly. So that was really the genesis for her founding the Joyful Doctor, and it's really wonderful to work with her and to work as her head of training. So talking about that, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, how are you feeling? Really feeling? Now, you're welcome to put it in the chat or not, just reflect yourself. And I often bring this up at the beginning of a talk, especially for those of us who live and work in the UK, because culturally, as we all know, we tend to be not great about sharing how we really feel, even aside from our professional roles. But it's quite important, I think, to notice and name how you feel. For me, that was a big barrier. So there's a normal range of human emotions that we're all feeling or have felt. Some of us are feeling angry. For example, the 1% pay rise might be causing anger. People have been feeling anxious and angry about the PPE, especially last year. People are feeling anxious, like I just mentioned, about themselves or their loved ones. I think less so in some cases now that there's more of the vaccine out, but there are other frustrations that come with it. I know in general practice you have a lot of angry patients, frustrated patients. You're sort of in a difficult spot, sometimes being the gatekeeper for this limited resource, which is the vaccine. Some people feel proud and excited, and rightly so, because you're doing some amazing work, especially with the vaccine. I know that's caused some real positives as well, which is great. Some people feel excited about the opportunities, whether it's about the pandemic or not. I've went to a really interesting lecture, and there were some immunologists who are absolutely buzzing with excitement about this new organism and about the new vaccine, because that's the stuff they really love, and it's really amazing for them to be able to be really helping people. So it really depends on you and your interests and your expertise as to how you feel about some of the pandemic. And then some of it's just about being human. Yeah, how are you feeling? It might be different from day to day. You might experience the same thing as somebody else and yet have a different response. Some people just feel fine and are just getting on with it. Some of us are feeling quite flat. And the other thing that we've heard a lot of is people feeling quite guilty. And I think if you're a caring person, a caring professional, it can be really hard when you've got so many different caring responsibilities, like I just touched on before. And you can sometimes feel guilty whatever you're doing. You're guilty if you're at work, and then you're guilty if you're not at work, because there's always somebody you're not with. And sometimes in the middle of all of that, it's very difficult to find space for you. So lots of different things just to reflect on as we start. And also just to acknowledge it's been a really difficult time. It's been really tough for so many of us in so many ways, for the clinical staff and for the non-clinical staff. I think it's just it's been a long time. There's still a lot of uncertainty, and there's been some real distress as well as, and I think that's difficult to manage, especially in the long haul. I used to be a medical receptionist before I went to medical school, so I know what that feels like. One thing I noticed when I was a medical receptionist, it was a few years ago, was that often people who were frustrated would come and there'd be more frustration expressed to the administrative staff than to the clinical staff. And that could feel quite difficult. And I think it's really important when you work in a close-knit team in primary care, all different specialties together, all different people with different expertise, just to pause and just to acknowledge how it's been for everybody. But, you know, there's some good things too. So we're going to spend some time thinking about that today. And we wanted to think about some changes that we've all been through. We touched on this earlier, but we've all been through so many. And one, I think, practical, obvious change is this. This is very familiar, isn't it? We're all sitting here on Zoom. It would be absolutely lovely to be jumping on and seeing you in real life, or coming, God forbid, coming to your actual practice and having an actual chat. But we've got used to this. And I think there's some ways we can manage this for it to feel okay. I think going forward, especially in general practice, there's been a lot of shifts in the way you deliver care. And I imagine that some of these practices might continue, even when the pandemic requirement for them has diminished. So it's worth just pausing to think a little bit about that. So we've got a few minutes to talk about this, but not loads of time. So I have actually done a free ebook on this, which you can get from my website if you'd like to know more about working from home or how to work well when you're working anywhere. And you can get that from my website, theworkingwelldoctor.com. I'll put that in now if you're interested. Because I've got an occupational health background, I kind of did a bit of research on this when I wrote the book. So just a few snippets from the book here. The first is, are you sitting comfortably? Now, this is why it's lovely to have everyone on screen. I can see someone's looking good on their seat. I can see Susie's kind of leaning. That's okay, she's on her day off. But if she was at her desk, it would be good for her to be more like square on. Who else can I see? Some people have got lovely posture. Everyone's probably sitting up really straight now. And some people have got their cameras off. But the one thing I found, but I don't know about you, when I first started working from home, is I just jumped, just literally grabbed a laptop, kitchen table, and then that was me. Okay, I'm working now. And that's fine for a short time, but it isn't ideal in the long run. because of what this picture quite nicely demonstrates, is that we are, as I'm sure you all know, musculoskeletal creatures. You must have had loads of patients coming with aches and pains, and it's not rocket science, but it is helpful to stop and think, how am I sitting? And the key really is, as you can see here in this picture with the green tick, is lots of right angles at your elbows, hips, knees and ankles, and then trying to have a straight wrist. And getting your setup for you is really helpful. Now, I'm a pretty short person, and I found sitting actually at the kitchen table didn't work for me because I'm so short. The kitchen table was too high, so I was doing that, which is fine, like I said, for a few days, but over years, months and months, it became problematic. So do think about that. I know the best way, because I've talked to physiotherapists about this, is actually to get things set up and let's get somebody else to look at you to see if you are sitting as well as you think you are, and also to check in as the day goes past, whether it's a partner or if you're at home or if you're working at work, get a colleague to have a quick look, because we often start like this with good intentions, and then by the end of the day we're like this. So just some simple things. If you want more resources on this, there's a great resource from the HSE website. I'll write this in, HSE, Health and Safety Executive, and they've got a webpage called the DSE. So HSE DSE, DSE is Display Screen Equipment. That's what it stands for. And there are some duties that employers have actually to help their employees sit properly to prevent musculoskeletal issues. So it's not rocket science, but it's worth having a think about. The other thing that I talk more about in the ebook is your physical environment, not just your sitting posture, but the heat and light and so on that surrounds you, because if you don't manage those, again, you can get aches, pains, headaches and things, which can be quite debilitating. And I'm guessing that you might have seen a few patients with issues like this in the past year. Then breaks. This is one of my favorite subjects. So I don't know about you, I feel really guilty about taking breaks, especially when I was doing busy clinical practice. I know it's massively busy in general practice. You know, your lunch breaks are often filled with scripts or home visits, and you know, the opportunity to actually sit down and take a break or so forth is very difficult. But there's quite a lot of evidence that it's really beneficial, and often breaks pay for themselves, which is one reason I wanted to bring it up. One thing I often share is a really interesting study where they did ask surgeons to do routine surgery. One of them took a break halfway through, the other didn't. They made the patient safe. They didn't leave the table. They basically stood by the patient and had 3 or 4 minutes looking out the window or talking to each other while the patient was safe. And then they resumed the surgery. And the operations took the same time, which shows that the break paid for itself in the cognitive and performance. The cognitive benefit resulted in better performance in the surgeon who had had a short break. So it's worth thinking about that when you're having a massively busy day. If you build in a break, you're not likely to run later. You're probably likely to perform better, which is better for you and your patients, and you won't be later at the end of the day than you had been if you'd gone straight through without a break. Obviously, it's lovely to have lots of long, luxurious breaks. I'm not suggesting that's easy or even possible, but when you are doing something that's a lot of work, but you can manage your time, I would suggest you try and take a break every 20 minutes. It really doesn't have to be long. And then after 4 of those 20 or 30-minute chunks, have a longer break. There's more information on that in the ebook, but there's some evidence that's a really helpful structure. And if you can't do that, there's also some evidence you can do something called a micro break, which is literally when you think, oh, I just really need a break, that feeling, it's worth listening to that. And if you can, just take a really short break then, like 1 or 2 minutes. And for example, we're looking at a screen now. So the break I would suggest would involve no screen. So it's not like don't check your phone on your break. Just try really hard to not do anything that's work related. And on that note, before we move on to our second part of the day, I'm going to talk about moving, because this is an ideal thing to do on your breaks. There's lots of different ways to build this in. If you're working at home, I've got a friend who works downstairs and only ever uses the upstairs loo when she works from home, so she gets herself up and down those stairs. You might do something simple like a little bit of HIIT, or there's an 8-minute Joe Wicks I found where you can just literally do 8 minutes of exercise, or you might just want to do some stretches at your desk, some desk-a-cise. And I'm going to give you guys 1 minute with your cameras on to do one desk-a-cise with me before we move on to the next section. So I'm going to ask you just to stretch your arms out like this and bring those shoulder blades down. Because this is one of my favorite stretches, because we all end up doing this. But if you want to, if you're able to bring your shoulders and your elbows to 90 degrees and then literally open those arms up Lovely, well done. And activate those rhomboids or bring those shoulder blades together. I don't know if you can see me doing that, the difference between that and that. Can you see those shoulder blades dropping down? Hold that for 20 seconds. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. You'd normally do several of these, or you could stand up and stretch or look out the window. Probably had about 20 seconds now. I can see some people doing this. I'm working. No. Lovely. I can see lots of people doing that. Lovely. And you can see I'm also working from home, so I've got some interruptions going on there, which is something else I talk about in the ebook. Lovely. I can see some good exercises going here. Excellent stuff. So just really encouraging you to think about how you're going to take your breaks and what you're going to do on them. All right. So now you're all stretched, people standing up. Oh, nice shoulder roll there, Susie. You might want to stand up if you like. This will be the next section where we talk and think a bit more together now about joy. So how to bring the joy back to work. This is the bit where we're going to be thinking together and exploring some ideas. Feel free to have a sip together for those of you who are having a drink. I'm also realizing some of you are together in a room, which is lovely. So when we come to do the groups, I might ask you guys who are physically together to be a group. And Ola and I will talk about that because we're going to go into groups in a minute. Lovely. So we're going to do something called Appreciative Inquiry. And this is a lovely exercise, and I love this picture here. It's really about valuing and exploring. Valuing and exploring. And if you can see here, this person is doing that. They've explored all the way to this beautiful scenery and they've paused to appreciate the view. So my suggestion is we spend a few minutes together thinking in this kind of way about things that we really find joyful. The first premise of this, and this is a lovely exercise, I'll go through a few of the sort of theories behind it, so you could do this yourselves in future as a team. It's a simple exercise with some sort of simple premises. The first is, you know what brings you joy. You don't need me to tell you. And I love this picture here. It's really, you know, these people are standing around a fire with a warm drink. No one told them to do that, but they instinctively knew that if they did that, it would make them feel good and connected and warm and nourished. So in the same way, we all know within us as individuals and often as teams what is joyful, what helps us feel good. And the next premise is that you get more of what we focus on. And it's often the children who help us with this, isn't it? That's why I love this picture. Often we can learn from our children. So focusing on the positives helps you get more positive experiences. Relationships thrive where there is an appreciative eye. That's a really lovely phrase, I think, that sums this premise up. So we're going to think a bit together using these themes. And the first question I'm going to ask you to think about is, what does joy mean to you? Here's somebody who's joyful. They might be relieved, excited, feeling a real sense of achievement. And there's other types of joy as well, aren't there? What about this? I would say all these people are joyful. Maybe this chap here, you can't see how he's feeling, but these two are definitely joyful, but they're not smiling, are they? They're actually working quite hard, especially this woman. But it doesn't mean they're not joyful. They're working together, they're playing, they're having a common goal, they're outdoors. There's lots of things here that make this a joyful picture. And also, I'm pretty sure she's going to get this ball. So she's going to get that satisfaction of actually getting it as well, of achieving her goal. Or maybe joy means this to you. This lovely photo of shared experience, social connection, and just really being in the moment, enjoying that moment of fun. So lots of different ideas there about joy, just to get your little grey cells working. So here's a question for you. When were you joyful at work? I'm going to ask you to think a little bit about this together. Even if it was pre-medical school. Doesn't have to have been recently. When were you joyful? And why? What made it good? I'm going to ask you just to think about that and write. I'm going to give you just literally 30 seconds to write down some ideas on a pen and paper. I'm trusting you all. Primary care teams are going to have pens and paper to hand. If you don't, you could just think it or put it in your phone on the notes section. Just 2 or 3 more seconds to write that down. And then we're going to go into some breakout rooms and think about those ideas a bit more and discuss them in your groups. So this is the bit where Ola and I do a little bit of work together on this while you guys have a bit more of a think. We're just going to do a little bit of number crunching. We have got 21 of you, and then there's a group of you guys, haven't you, here, who are in one room. How many of you are in one room? Would you mind letting me know? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of you. Great. Would you like to? And what's the name of that video? I can't actually see. If you guys would like to be one room, fine. So if you're one room, not sure how to do that. And then we'll have 20 others, and then you can each be in rooms of 4, I think. What do you think, Ola? Does that sound good? So we'll have 5 rooms with individual people in the rooms, and then we'll have the 6th room as just this one screen with 4 of you guys together. Is that something we can arrange, Ola?
Yep, I'm just going to do it now.
Lovely. So what I'm going to do while that gets sorted out is you'll each go into a room in a minute. You'll be invited into a breakout room. And for everybody except this group here together, you'll be invited to go into a room, and by Zoom, you'll be put in a room together by Ola, and you'll have about 5 minutes together just to think about these ideas. What or when were you joyful at work, and what made it good? I'm going to ask you just to focus on the positives. It is sometimes easy to slip into talking about the negatives, but just for now, for the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to ask you to think together about the positives, and then nominate one spokesperson from each room. So one spokesperson from each room. Everybody, going to wait for everyone to join again. I'm just going to get this ready. I'm going to say text. All right. Oops. That's my timer telling me it's time for those breakout rooms to finish up. Let's see how many people have joined us now. We've got 21. Is everybody back? Let's see if I can see you, a lovely lot. Lovely, everybody's back. How are you looking? Everyone's looking quite restful, which is nice. I hope that was a good experience. All right, so now you might, if I've got a whiteboard up here, if somebody could give me a thumbs up when they could see the whiteboard. Can anybody see the whiteboard? Thank you very much. You joyful. Okay, so I am just going to ask you to share some of your thoughts. We've got 5 rooms, so I'm just literally going to go around each room. They are numbered, but it's quite difficult to remember. So I'm going to ask Ola to sing out the names of people in room 1, and then if one of you, the spokesperson from room 1, would like to share when you were joyful at work and what themes came up for you.
So room 1's Judith, Laura, I'm not quite sure how to say that name, and Shella.
Lovely. Is that any, and who's this? Lovely. Room 1, there's your names sung out. Would one of you, your spokesperson, like to share your thoughts? What themes did you discuss about when were you joyful at work? Anybody? Silence. Anybody recognise themselves in their own room one?
Yeah, I think for us, mainly we were harking back to the days of more contact with other members of staff.
Yeah.
So pre-COVID, where we were all meeting up for larger meetings or working with members of our team.
Yeah.
And then it went from that to nothing. And so the last time some of us felt joyful was when we were last together, and we used to see people once a month that you wouldn't see ordinarily, and we've not seen now for a year. Yeah,
that's a really common theme. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much. That's really common. It's actually something that's in the ebook. I talk about how to remain connected in a virtual world. So if you're interested, you can grab that. I'll put my website here if you would like, just so it's there. Working Well Doctor. Because yeah, that's really important. I totally agree. And there's some ideas in the ebook about how to do that. But also from your side, is there any thoughts you had about how you might be able to try and get that contact? Anything within your group or team or practice?
We are starting now. We're back in the office, and we moved to larger premises. So we have got our team back together.
Lovely.
So we have got that support now from other members of staff, which is really great.
Great. So the thing is really is to try and the good thing, I guess, you're definitely going to notice and appreciate that, and maybe it's worth thinking once you're back together of ways to build that into your working days and weeks. Like you mentioned, there are meetings, but maybe do you have any ideas on that? Or
we have talked about some team building days going forward, but then they were scrapped thanks to the vaccination program, which we're all busy working on at the moment. But hopefully after August, you would like to think that we can get on with some of those things.
Yeah. How have you found working on the vaccination program itself? Has that allowed more contact?
It has, yes, it has. Because we kind of went from working at home in our bedrooms. For me, I was homeschooling twins at the same time because I didn't want to send them to school.
Golly.
And yes, stressful, hashtag.
Gosh.
And then so it felt like I was locking myself in bedroom, and then so having little contact all year, and then coming back to work from sort of November time when we moved into the larger office. And then being surrounded by so many people, and that took quite a lot of adjustment, really.
Yeah,
it was really hard.
Yeah, you're not alone in that either. I read it. I posted an article about that actually recently. Yes, I think you're not alone. It's all change, isn't it? There's even positive. We all know the evidence, don't we? Positive change is just as challenging.
Yeah, and then we started being. We were all drafted in to be admin within. In some of our settings where the vaccinations were taking place. And then you were thinking, you've been in a room shut in by yourself, and now you're in a room with 20 plus people. It was just bizarre, and you did have to take a moment to kind of just acknowledge that massive change.
Yeah, I think that's really, really true. Yeah, I think that's really true. Yes, I remember when I qualified as a doctor and the professor was up on the stage talking about, welcome to the world of medicine. And I thought she'd say something really deeply profound. What she said was, the only constant is change.
I was told that actually in my first week in the NHS. And
there you go.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? It's true. Yeah. It's not always easy, but it's true. And I think when we can accept that and work with it and maybe work together and sort of sessions like this, it can help. But I think it starts with acknowledging, doesn't it? Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. And if you wanted to email me later, happy to talk more. All right, lovely. Room 2, I'm going to give you a new colour. You're going to get a lovely lilac. Ola, would you mind singing out the names of room 2 so they know who they are?
Gail, Helen, Julie, Naren and Philip.
Lovely. And would one of you lovely people like to be the spokesperson for what you guys reflected on together?
I don't mind.
Okay.
Very similar themes to room one and what Laura's mentioned. We actually discussed how, I think Philip was helping with the COVID vaccination program and how that way of working was different, and it stimulated him and his team to think of different ways of working. And we also said, with COVID, we were trying to look after ourselves, hopefully a bit more, and our team as well, maybe more than before. So that brought the team together, even though we're working perhaps more virtually.
Yeah.
I think Gail mentioned a very, happy case where one of her patients who was getting more and more poorly finally ended up having a liver transplant. So that's a real shining light in a very dark time, really. So.
Yes, so that's really about what's the word? Maybe that satisfaction feeling that we talked about in that slide. So there's some positive patient outcomes, even outside of COVID. So it's lovely. Yeah, there's some really common themes there. We did go into this job, whether we're clinical or not, to try and help others get better or improve, and it's lovely when that does happen. And I think you're right. I think there's been some real challenges obviously in the pandemic, but it's lovely. And I think one of the positives is these things, we're talking more about this now, and you've been talking previously about ways to look out for each other. So I think that creativity, the motivation and creativity that comes from that is a real positive, though it takes time, I think, to reflect together and work out what's going to work. So the idea of today is hopefully it'll help you brainstorm ideas and think of some positive concrete actions. Did you have anything positive or concrete? For example, you were thinking of ways to look out for each other. Were there any practical themes that you drew out?
In my own work, in our practice, we've got set up a WhatsApp group.
Oh, lovely. That's a nice idea.
So, we post just things, if we're going to be late, for example, or how's everyone doing, or if, family members unwell, just, keeping the team updated, and, we're checking up on each other all the time in that sense. And we even post things like, light-hearted stuff like, perhaps, jokes to do, just to keep ourselves going, really. So
absolutely, that's great. So that's a really lovely example, actually, of a practical thing you can do to sort of as an output from these bigger themes we've been talking about. That's lovely. And how's that feeling? How's that WhatsApp group feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it's really good.
Lovely.
It's great. Really positive, yeah.
That's really good. Oh, that's a lovely idea. Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Room 3, you're getting a nice dark green colour. Ola, would you be happy to sing out the names for room 3?
Yeah, it's Elizabeth, Hibber, Ruth and Susie.
Lovely. And would one of you like to be the spokesperson for what you guys discussed?
I don't mind doing it. So we mentioned teamwork and camaraderie, particularly we chatted about that really kind of camaraderie you got just after qualifying when you were all in it together and in at the deep end, and that being, but obviously that's still in general practice, and how those nice coffee breaks are so important. We also mentioned sort of that realization, the joy that you get of being in either the right place because you're in the right practice, you found your practice, or that you found the job that you love to do, such as, you realize medicine was right for you, or being a GP was right for you. We also mentioned achievement. So Ruth cited the fact that she'd had a long period off sick, and when she came back after a long time off, that massive sense of achievement of having, got there, got back to it, and felt good. And then the other thing that gave us joy was kind of nature, really. So those breaks in the middle of the day where perhaps you'd managed to get a walk in or nip to the park, or something that actually made you appreciate that there was something outside the four walls of your consulting room or surgery.
Amazing. That's really lovely. I'm not sure if I can spell camaraderie, but anyway, there's some lovely themes there, aren't there? So yes, having coffee breaks, really appreciating the sense of achievement, and building nature contact into your day. So you've already drawn out some really good themes. There's some practical things along with the bigger themes, like going on that break, having that walk. And I think it's lovely, this idea of not just doing the thing where you come back to work, but noticing it and celebrating it. So that's really about sort of noticing and celebrating and naming. So I think there's some lovely things there. And that's one thing that's lovely doing these exercises. Often you realize that there are big themes here, some of which can feel insurmountable, but some small things are achievable. So it is achievable to fit a walk in or to have a WhatsApp group. But even just something that takes no time, or maybe a second or two, it's just noticing that achievement. That took 2 seconds, but it's a huge benefit. So some really lovely thoughts there. Great, that's really lovely. It sounds like some really lovely things. It's lovely to the sense that you found your place. Lovely, that's so great. After all that training and all the work, that's so lovely that's some of you have experienced that. Thank you very much. That's great. All righty, room 4, you're going to get a nice fuchsia. Oh no, room 3 has got fuchsia. Room 4. Ola, would you mind reading out the names for room 4?
Yeah, it's Elena, Faye, Pauline and Rachel.
Lovely. Would one of you like to share your thoughts from the session?
I'm happy to. It's roughly the same story. What we found joyful was conducting the COVID clinics, because there was a buzz back in the surgery, senior colleagues, banter in the corridors, seeing patients face to face. Yeah. Someone else mentioned seeing the elderly, because obviously you've not seen your elderly patients for a year, and them being so appreciative.
Yeah.
That was joyful.
Yeah.
And interacting with each other is the joyful times. And then we tried to avoid the negative that's come with that, but it was mainly the socializing is what is joyful.
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? It's like that slide at the beginning, the black and white one of the 2 girls. I think that's a really important part of human beings. We are a social species. I often talk in my other workshops, we evolved. We don't have the biggest claws. We're not the biggest creatures how did we succeed to be the most successful species? Well, aside from our big brains and our opposable thumbs, it's our social skills. It's allowed us to work together. And that's really important. Obviously, lockdown has really proved that. And it's really interesting. There's a big theme here, isn't there, on this whiteboard of that. So just encourage you to think about ways to build that in. And some of you guys got great ideas with the WhatsApp groups and the coffee groups. Any thoughts that you had particularly, or it sounds like you're already building this in with your banter, just in sort of simple interactions. It sounds like it doesn't have to always be a formal coffee break. It's literally just a smile or eye contact as you pass in the corridor. What's your sense for that?
Well, I think we do have coffee breaks, virtual ones as well, but I think we're kind of all a bit sick of the virtual world.
Real coffee breaks.
Yeah, and making each other drinks, and we're not even doing that at the moment. It's very odd. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you
that's
mean.
how we kept going to the negative, so it was hard.
I know, it's tricky, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it? There's something about the non-verbal cues. So making somebody a drink is a non-verbal way of showing appreciation. I think there's some really interesting things there, absolutely. So where possible to build those things in, definitely. I think you're right. So you put your finger on it. Virtual is okay, isn't it? But it has its limits. Better than nothing. And in some ways it can be beneficial. I think patients with limited mobility and so forth are examples of where it can be really helpful. All righty, last but not least, room 5. Who's in room 5, Ola?
That's Catherine Spooner, the group that are together.
Oh, lovely, the group that's all together. Lovely. Oh, there you are, you're ready to go. You know who you are. Lovely. Thank you for coming straight over. You're going to have a nice orange. Would you like to tell us what you discussed in room 5, the real room?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Ade. We are new registrars. We've just come from hospital jobs.
Oh, wow.
We're now I can see Naren smiling. We're down at Winglewood Medical Center. We've got Blessing, she's waving, and that's Steve and Katie as well. So we just talked around what made us joyful in our last hospital jobs. And then it's centered around all the things that a lot of people have mentioned, having that team bonding, getting lunch breaks together. Pre-COVID, it was very lovely going out in the sun and then just chatting, which was quite nice. Some of us will receive positive feedback from consultant on either long, busy sheets, but it's quite hard now trying to maintain that. But then moving forward, I think organizing outdoor walks. They've got very, very lovely scenic view out there. So outdoor walks, and then someone suggested painting as well.
Oh, lovely. Creative. Yes, that often comes up. Yes, creative pursuits. Absolutely.
And then the hurdles in the morning too as well. So that's really all.
That's lovely. I love that. Well, some lovely ideas there. Yeah, that's really interesting. The themes there. Often when I do this exercise, we do have creativity coming up, and I would encourage you to think about that, because most people who are highly capable, as everybody in a primary care team is, have many other parts of themselves that are not just their day job. And making space for creativity and exercise in nature is really helpful. And there's actually a lot of evidence, to get back to that, if you might make you feel guilty, which I used to feel, there's a lot of evidence that creative pursuits will help your cognitive abilities and decision making. And exercise, as you all know, is good for your physical body and your immunity, but also you produce great brain growth factor when you exercise. There are lots of reasons just to try and squeeze these things in or build them in. And I love this idea about positive feedback. You've got people mentioned in other groups about the positive feedback from patients, but it's lovely to hear about positive feedback from colleagues. And that's a lovely theme to draw out as well. Are there any thoughts you had about how you might better draw that positive feedback or bring that into the workplace, not just from consultants?
A good well, you're doing great. You're doing not just from colleagues, even it might be just the admin stuff as well. Just having just that 10 seconds to ask, oh, how is your day going? Oh, I sent this tax. You did this well. Oh, thank you for sorting out this referral. Thank you for doing that. That goes a long way in just making the other person happy and then have a great day.
I absolutely love that. That's exactly it. It's really, we're talking here about how we can draw themes out that are big, which is great, but also small actionable steps. So, and one of them is simply that, saying thank you for something big or small, and it takes, and we can all do that for each other. It doesn't just have to be a consultant saying well done to a non-consultant grade. We can all say thank you to each other about the big and the small stuff. And that takes no time. Well, it doesn't take 1 second, like you said, 10 seconds. I think those things can help too. So any other thoughts as we're just on time, but there's a few things, there's a few slides I wanted to share. So are people okay to stay for another 5 minutes? Do people, would that work? We've got some thumbs up here. If you do need to go, of course, feel free to. There are some slides and some signposting I will share at the end. But just before we ended, I'm going to save this so that you guys can get a copy of it if you would like, to share together with your teams or for people who couldn't be here, just with some ideas going forward. And I'd just like you to think now about any next steps that you would like to take, having had this time to think together. We've talked already about lots of actions just in the group, but if there's any one simple thing you might want to do individually or as a team, just to help bring a bit more joy into your work or into your home life, doesn't just have to be work, it'd be lovely to hear them. So something that I'm going to put in for my work is saying thank you more often. There you go. I'm just going to give you one or two. I'm probably going to give a minute because we don't want to take too much time, as we don't want to run over too much. Just going to ask you to think about your next steps. Lovely time to talk. Permission to breaks. I love it. Permission is so key, isn't it? Just to say, one of us has had to nip off, which is fine. If there's other people want to just pop any ideas in the chat, or if you want to think about it for later, that's fine too. Lovely. Saying hello. That's a lovely one. Encouraging stretching. Noticing achievements. That is lovely. Really great things. And what I'm going to do with this chat, with your permission, is I'm going to save this and send this round as well, because the evidence is that if you write it down, you're more likely to do it, which is why I've asked you to write it down. And if you keep each other or yourselves accountable, you're more likely to do it. So I'm going to send, with Susie's permission, if this is something that feels right, I'm happy to send this whiteboard and these comments in the chat round so that you can have them to refer to in a week or 2 weeks or your next team meeting, and just to check in, am I doing those? How's it going with that stretching at the desk? How's it going with the saying hello? That's lovely. Gail's popping off. No worries, Gail. There'll be some slides that I think we'll be sharing afterwards as well, with some signposting. That is lovely. Thank you very much, guys. And I've just saved this now, this whiteboard. So I'm just going to finish off with some final slides with some great resources. And then we will see if I can get this sorted now. Ta-da! Here we go. Let me get my screen share going. Why is that not working? All right, I think I need to go share screen. Here we go. So our last few slides, I just wanted to share some really wonderful resources that we've got here. We've just done our next steps. Hopefully you can see that. So we've just talked about our next steps, which you've written down. And now we're going to skip these because we're running short on time. And I just wanted to finish up with some slides. So if people are struggling or need extra resources, we've got some wonderful resources here I wanted to share. First is obviously do see your own GP, don't be physician heal thyself. If you are struggling, there's the emergency numbers and so on. The Joyful Doctor has loads of great resources, and you can feel free to email us at teamjoy@joyfuldoctor.com. I'll put my email address, you'll get my email address in a minute as well. We're obviously, Joyful Doctor's on all the usual social media. And then we've got some wonderful resources here just for you, lovely lot in Derbyshire. Mindful art sessions with lovely resources. There's some counselling and listening services. NHS Practitioner House is a great resource, and you've got this rapid access support service. So clinical roles, there's nursing and pharmacist support. And for all GP practice staff, you've got these great resources too. And then some personal and team resilience sources for coaching, anxiety, some emotional work, and some lovely free access to wellbeing apps here. And some wraparound support for Derbyshire General Practice. You've got so many wonderful resources here, it's amazing. So lots of great stuff that is provided for you, and I'd encourage you to use them if you need. Of course, please, if you're struggling, please do seek help. It's really important that you look after yourself.